I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Monday. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Quick shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And guys, I hope you had a chance to check out our activist summit this weekend over at RBN. I think it went really well. There is about 48 hours, or maybe not 48 hours. There's 2 days, but hours, 2 days worth of educational material over there. For those of you who do want to get involved and do want to get out there and do something, that summit gave you the opportunity to meet multiple people from different activist organizations and what they're doing in their community and how you could join them or how you can start a chapter in your community as well. So definitely check that out. I thought, again, like I said, I thought it went well. There's just a wealth of information over there. Like, you learn so much. So thank you guys for those of you who were able to check it out. Want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. What is going on, Rodrigo? Now that progressives have called for peace with Ukraine, this finally gives liberal YouTubers cover to call for peace as well. So you noticed that too, Rodrigo. Yeah, you shouldn't have to take your cues from people in Congress. Like, I don't take my cues from people in Congress. You should be for something regardless if it's popular or not. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. What's going on? Hannah G says, great summit, Sabby. Thank you so much. Barbara, hello, everybody. Hit the like button. Yes, hit that like button, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. Shout out to Angela. Hello, all you awesome people. Refreshed from the summit and ready for Sabby. Hashtag like button smash. What's going on? Sean says, yo. Shout out to Noli D, says Sabby. What's up, Noli D? Greetings, Anthony gives a smile. What's going on, Gamer says hello. Shout out to Brandy, says hello, everyone. Greetings, Sebastian says, hey, y'all. I always like to say it like that. What's going on, Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says nice, colorful dress. This is actually a shirt. I know it looks like a dress on camera, but it's actually a shirt. It's very rainy here. And when we have a rainy, cloudy day, I like to wear something bright because it kind of like, lift your spirits there a bit. What's going on? Rick says, hey, y'all. Shout out to Angela with a smile. Oh, I already said Angela. Sorry, Angela. What's going on, Roger Meadows? Hi, Sab. We're going to make you a master chess player if it kills me. I don't know how to play chess. That's what Roger's talking about. My dad knows how to play chess, though. I played checkers, Roger. I grew up with checkers, but I can learn. What's going on, Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Monday to all lefty friends. Shout out to Jonathan, says, hey, Sabby, what's up, Jonathan? What is going on? Peggy says, happy Monday evening, everyone. All right. Let me go ahead and click this here because I clicked on it twice. What are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let me go ahead and share my thumbnail here. Let's share the thumbnail. It is a manic Monday, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are talking about Richard Wolff's Cold War. Great discussion there with Richard Wolff and RJ about the situation in Russia and Ukraine. That's actually going to be connected to our other story, which is Joe Biden's interview about that particular situation. We're going to break that down tonight. I'm also going to discuss Bernie Sanders' fears. Bernie is going on a lot of mainstream media lately, really trying to get people to come out to the polls. We're going to go through that interview. And also, Gloria Caballero will be here as the third party candidate spotlight. So she will be coming on a little bit later. So let's go ahead and get into it. Quick shout out to people who are Sabby patrons. Let me go ahead and share. And if you are a patron or if you have sent me an email, I am going to be going through all of those. I have been really behind on emails and Patreon messages. So hopefully I'll be able to get through those this weekend. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, doing the damn thing. Thank you guys so much. It really does help me out. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for Nutrition Witch. That is an interesting name. Welcome, welcome, and thank you all. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right, we're going to get into our first story here, and this is the Joe Biden interview with Jake Tapper. Now, I found this to be particularly interesting. Obviously, they are talking about Russia and Ukraine, and I think we need to listen to Joe Biden's response to this. And then I'm going to also talk about what are progressives in Congress asking Joe Biden to do now. So things have started to change and have started to shift. So let's go ahead and get into that.
Thank you so much for doing this, sir. Appreciate it.
Happy to.
So for people at home who don't know, this is the MAMP room. During World War II, this is where it was basically the Situation Room for FDR. He would look at sensitive information. And now we're at a period where there's another high stakes war in Europe. You recently said that this is the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that there's a legitimate possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon, which could lead to Armageddon. That's the word you used.
Just that thought right there, that this could lead to Armageddon. And Joe Biden looks a little bit uneasy here. Look at that. Look at his facial expression. You know, the fact that we don't have more people talking about this is very concerning. We do not need to have a nuclear war that could devastate the world, not just Russia and Ukraine, the entire world. And those who do survive, if there are people that do survive, what will be left for them? They won't be able to have food. They won't be able to grow food. And then there's also radiation. So the fact that this is even being discussed so casually, I want people to understand just how serious this could be if this were to happen. And the fact that Joe Biden even made that statement so casually, everyone should be concerned. He should be doing everything that he can right now to call for some type of peaceful resolution. And we've been saying that since day one. You need to call for peace. But here we are.
Realistic is it, do you think, that Putin would use a tactical nuclear weapon?
Well, I don't think he will, but I think it's irresponsible for him to talk about it. The idea that a world leader of one of the largest nuclear powers in the world says he may use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, and the whole point I was making was it could lead to just a horrible outcome. And
let me go ahead and increase the volume on this.
Not because anybody in nuclear powers in the world says he may use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. And the whole point I was making was it could lead to just a horrible outcome. And not because anybody intends to turn it into a world war or anything, but it just, once you use a nuclear weapon, the mistakes that can be made, the miscalculations, who knows what would happen.
I actually don't remember him saying that. And if I'm wrong, if I'm incorrect in the chat, please let me know. But I don't remember him making that statement.
What is the red line for the United States and NATO? And have you directed the Pentagon and other agencies to game out what a response would be if he did use a tactical nuclear weapon, or if he bombed the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, or anything along those lines?
There's been discussions on that, but I'm not going to get into that. It would be irresponsible of me to talk about what we would or wouldn't do.
Have you asked?
There's been discussions of that, but I'm not going to get into that. You made a statement to the American people that we could be headed towards Armageddon, but you don't want to comment on if there would be a response from us or how we would respond. So you have all these people in a state of fear. Like, people are just freaked out. But you're like, I don't know if I want to comment on that. Okay.
Ask the Pentagon to game it out, though? I mean, just in case.
The Pentagon didn't have to be asked.
So French President Macron told me that he doesn't think that
I want you to hear something that he just said right here, because this proves a point.
the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine or anything along those lines.
There's been discussions on that, but I'm not going to get into that. It would be irresponsible of me to talk about what we would or wouldn't do.
Have you asked the Pentagon to game it out, though? I mean, just in case.
The Pentagon didn't have to be asked.
This is another example where I talk about with foreign policy where the president of the United States can act alone. This is the one policy where he really doesn't have to get approval from Congress. Now, will they get approval from Congress in reference to spending money? Yes, that's why the billions and billions of dollars are going out of the door. Congress are the ones who are approving that. But when he wants to make a decision about foreign policy, how he would respond, he doesn't have to necessarily get the approval of Congress. And this is why it is incredibly important that if you are running for president of the United States, that you are very well versed in foreign policy. Now, some people disagree with me on this, but this is why I think having some type of military experience can actually help you if you're a presidential candidate. Some people disagree. Some people say, you don't need to have military experience. Okay, fine. But then you need to have some knowledge of foreign policy, because you can make a decision on your own which could be detrimental to Americans here in the United States and abroad. So when you have these candidates and they're making these statements, and it's very clear to me, no offense, but Marianne Williamson is very clear to me that they are not well versed in foreign policy, that's scary.
So French President Macron told me that he doesn't think that Putin is acting rationally. And he said that he thinks a lot of this is because of how isolated Putin was for 2 years during the pandemic. And others who have dealt with him, Condi Rice and Bob Gates and James Clapper, have used words like erratic and unhinged to describe Putin's behavior today. Do you think Putin is a rational actor?
I think he is a rational actor who's miscalculated significantly. I think he thought, you may recall, I pointed out that they were going to invade, that all those 100,000 or more troops there, and no one believed that he was going to invade Ukraine. You listen to what he says. If you listen to the speech he made after, when that decision was being made, he talked about the whole idea of he was needed to be the leader of Russia that united all the Russian speakers. I mean, I just think it's irrational.
So if he's not rational.
So I'm a little bit confused, because he said a rational actor who miscalculated significantly, but now he just said he's irrational. So which is it? Aye.
And
no, I didn't say he's not rational.
You said the speech is what?
I think the speech is
okay.
His objectives were not right. I think he thought, Jake, he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this has been the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated.
So you talked about this a few days ago, the search for an off-ramp for him, because his back is against the wall. There are questions about how rational he is. He already was a brutal dictator. What is the off-ramp? There's
questions about how rational Joe Biden is too. Who is running this country?
Is there any acceptable way that he can leave, in his mind, without seizing territory in a way that would not be acceptable to Ukraine?
I don't know what's in his mind, but clearly he could leave. He could just flat leave and still probably hold his positioned together in Russia.
And you really think that that's what's going to happen? Just leave. I don't see him leaving without some type of concession. I don't see him leaving without some type of territory going over towards Russia. I don't see that happening. And I could be wrong. But the fact that this has gone on for as long as it has, the fact that tensions have escalated, the fact that, and let's remember, there was a call for peace negotiation before it got to this point. At this point in time, I don't see him leaving without some type of concession for him. I think Joe Biden is being naive here. I really do.
The idea that he's been able to convince the significant Russian America of the Russian people that this is something that he thought made sense, but now he's accomplished what he wanted to do, and it's time to bring Russians home.
Would you be willing to meet with him at the G20?
Look, I have no intention of meeting with him, but for example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Griner, I'd meet with him. I mean, it would depend.
What? I have no intention of meeting with him, but if he came to me and said he wanted to talk about Griner, I'd meet with him. I have no intentions of meeting with him, but I would meet with him.
Depend, but I can't imagine. Look, we've taken a position. I just did a G7 meeting this morning. The idea, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So I'm not about to, nor is anyone else prepared to negotiate with Russia about them staying in Ukraine, keeping any part of Ukraine, etc. So
then what are you going to negotiate? See, this is the problem. I really do not believe that he is going to leave without some type of concession, some type of territorial concession. So if you're not willing to even talk to him about that, what are you expecting to get out of this at this point?
it would depend on specifically what he wanted to talk about. But look, he's acted brutally. He's acted brutally. I think he's committed war crimes.
That means a lot coming from Joe Biden. Coming from Joe Biden, he's going to call someone else out about war crimes. Okay.
So I don't see any rationale to meet with him now.
When people hear the word Armageddon,
are you going to meet with him or are you not going to meet with him? He just went back and forth. Like Rick says, the man forgets what he said at the beginning of his sentences. Right. Like he just went back and forth like 3 different times. I'm not going to meet with them. I would meet with them. I'm not going to meet with them. Jake Tapper doesn't push back on that.
they get scared from used by a U.S. president. They get scared. Do you think in any way discussing this type of thing publicly, openly, Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons, might have the opposite effect of what you want? It might make some of our wobblier European allies be even more scared of confronting Putin.
Well, no, I don't think so at all. I think, look, it was a directed, when I'm talking about, I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made, and the miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could?
Well, no, I don't think anyone, any rational person saying the initial use of of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
He's not afraid of that?
It could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could?
Well, no, I don't think anyone.
He just said it could end in Armageddon. Jake Tapper is asking him, and you're still afraid of that. And he goes, well, no. What? After you got everyone afraid and everyone scared in this country after the tweet and the message that you put out saying we could be headed towards Armageddon, and now you say you're not afraid?
Any rational person saying the initial use of of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
Let's turn to Saudi Arabia. Some of your Democratic allies on Capitol Hill are afraid that the U.S. got played when you went to Saudi Arabia and fist bumped with the Crown Prince, because now, obviously, a few months later, Saudi-backed OPEC is slashing oil production in partnership with Russia. The chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez, just called for a freeze on cooperation with Saudi Arabia, including most arms sales. Senator Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, says the Saudis sided with Russia against the United States. Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East and what was going on. And by the way, today I just got off the telephone with the president I got off the phone with the prime minister of Israel and the president of Lebanon. They've worked out a deal. They've been at war, declared war with one another for a long time.
That's not Saudi Arabia, though. I just want to point that out. He's talking specifically about Saudi Arabia. So this is a problem. I do want to correct something here. When he did go to Saudi Arabia, yes, he went there to talk about other things, but one of the conversations was about oil. I covered that story. Now he's trying to say he didn't talk to them about what is happening here. Do you see him falling apart right in front of our face? Jake Tapper didn't ask him anything about the U.S. relations with Lebanon. He specifically is asking him about Saudi Arabia. So to me, it doesn't matter that you made some type of agreement with Lebanon. What matters is, what are you going to do about the relationship with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia? Because let's be real, we got played.
We've worked out a boundary relationship along in the Eastern Mediterranean for oil. And they're going to make an agreement that is historic. We also got overflights for Israeli planes over Saudi Arabia. We got movement in terms of how we would deal in the Middle East with aggression from Iran. But it wasn't, there were eight other parties there. It wasn't about oil.
Okay, but
but we should, and I am in the process when this House and Senate gets back. They're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with.
Really? Are there really going to be consequences this time? Because I've watched the United States make excuses for them every time. What about the journalist? What about the journalist? I mean, do we all remember the journalist who was killed? Were there any type of consequences for that? No. So am I really supposed to believe that there's going to be consequences this time around? I mean, what does it take?
Russia.
what kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences.
You can answer yes or no to that question, because the arms that Saudi Arabia is getting from the United States, they use to kill people in Yemen. Now, Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna have made statements saying that, look, we need to end this slaughter basically in Yemen. We need to make sure that this is rectified in some way, shape, or form. But here you have Joe Biden. See, this is why I say they're not on the same page. Then you have Joe Biden sitting right here. He won't even tell you whether or not we'll end arms sales to Saudi Arabia. What have they used those weapons on? What have they done with the weapons that they received from the United States? They've used it to basically commit a genocide in Yemen. And he can't say yes or no to that question. I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do, but there will be consequences. Okay, we'll see.
Midterm elections are 4 weeks from today. The economy remains top of mind for voters. JP Morgan Chase CEO said the U.S. is likely to enter a recession in the next 9 months. Bank of America says the U.S. could start losing 175,000 jobs a month. Gas prices are on the rise again. Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. Every 6 months they say this. Every 6 months they look down the next 6 months and see what's going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't. There's no guarantee that they're going to be. I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down.
What the hell is a slight recession? That's like being kind of broke. It's like either you're broke or you're not broke. A slight recession. I've never heard that before in my life. He's not going to say it. I'll say it. Yes, you should be prepared for that. Because I've heard this multiple times throughout my adult life. Oh, no, we're not headed towards a recession. Boom, recession happens. What the hell is that? Wow.
Slightly. Well, look, think about what's happened. We have done more. We're in a better position than any other major country in the world, economically and politically. We still have real problems, but look what we got done. We passed so much legislation that significantly makes a point about, for example, the American Rescue Plan, the legislation to deal with inflation, the Inflation Act. We moved along. I mean, there's so much that's been accomplished that the idea.
So much that has been accomplished. He named two things.
That there's an automaticity to recession is just not there. They've been predicting this off and on for the last.
But you just said that a slight recession is possible.
So it is possible. Look, it's possible. I don't anticipate it. What I do think, look,
somebody, I don't know if people are able to tune into Richard Wolff's like streams or whatever. The next time you watch Richard Wolff, someone should put a comment under one of his videos and say, or if you're a Patreon of Richard Wolff, send him a message and ask him, Professor Wolff, is there such thing as a slight recession? I'm curious to hear what he would say.
Talk about the impact on families. The families they have reason to be concerned about energy prices. They have reason to be concerned about a whole range of issues. But look what we've done. We've been able to, the Inflation Reduction Act. There's more, look, I know I always quoted my dad, but my dad used to say,
Inflation Reduction Act, again, did not actually address inflation. Like, see, he can't think of anything else. That's why he keeps saying that one, because that was the one that was most recent, right? So that's going to be on your mind, right? And plus, the name sounds good. Inflation Reduction Act. That means we reduced inflation. But I told you guys, we went through that whole bill, and I told you this is not actually addressing inflation. That's why American people are still upset. And that's why, judging by the numbers, the poll numbers I've seen, that's why the Democrats are at risk of losing the House and possibly losing the Senate, because they're not actually helping the American people economically. They're coming up with these bills with these fancy titles that make it seem like they're doing something, but they're not actually doing what the title says that they are doing. But he can't name anything else. This is the second time that he said, look at all the things we've done. The Inflation Reduction Act, that's one.
What is there any breathing room for a middle-class family? And the breathing room is after all the bills are paid at the end of the month, they have anything left. And there's more than one way to bring down the monthly cost for people who in fact are struggling, to make sure they have the ends meet and they have enough money. And that's what we've done with the Inflation Reduction Act. Look, we've reduced drug prices. We've allowed, for the first time, we've been trying for years to get Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices. We pay the highest drug prices of any nation in the world. Mm-hmm.
You reduce prescription drug prices for people that are on Medicare, not for the rest of us. And everything else is still high. Grocery store prices are still expensive. Even the restaurants have increased their prices. Everything else is still high. So what just say the what? Like, let's stop pretending like you did this for everyone. You didn't lower prescription drug prices for everyone, and the majority of Americans are not on Medicare. So who are you really helping? He's helping people that are over that certain age group, right? He's helping people who are part of the boomer generation, who are also the people who heavily come out and vote. Anybody catch that?
Major nation. We're going to be in a situation where no senior is going to have to pay more than $2,000 a year for the drugs, no matter how much they cost. We've reduced the price. They're going to make sure that nobody has to pay more than $35 a month for insulin, et cetera. So there's so much to be done. And the same with on energy. We passed look, what I ran on, I said we're going to deal with energy.
Right.
And the energy problem, we're going to deal with the whole notion of global warming. We passed $368 billion worth of help, which, as the same bankers talk about, is going to bring $1.7 billion off the sidelines, investment.
Which is nowhere near what we need to do for climate change. Nowhere near. It doesn't really matter that you passed energy legislation if you are still bombing countries. If the military industrial complex is still active and there's still war, that doesn't really help climate change. It's the largest single most polluter. So all these other things that people are doing, and we talked about this on the Activist Summit, solar panels, yes, those are good. Recycling, yes, that is also good. If you have an electric vehicle, yes, that also helps somewhat. But that being said, those things don't put anywhere near as much of a dent in reference to helping climate change if you still have an active MIC. That's the problem. And they're not going to disrupt that, because then that would disrupt their relationship for weapon contractors. Then they wouldn't be able to make any money for Lockheed Martin or Raytheon. You see the problem? Northrop Grumman. That's the problem. Then you wouldn't be able to try to be the leader of the world and police the world. Then you couldn't continue to steal resources from other countries and let the people live there in poverty. That's why they don't touch that. And the scientists will tell you that is what you really need to tackle. So all these other things that they're doing and people are telling you to do, that's cute, but that's not really going to help the problem.
Look what's happened. Look at the investment that's going on in America right now.
Yeah. So you think Democrats have something to run on?
Oh, I think we do. I know we do. And here's the contrast. We know what's the Republican platform to run on? What are they running on?
I'll tell you what they're running on. They are running against you and the things that you've done. They're running on the economy, which the economy is under Democrat control, right? So they can run on that. They're running on, in reference to the economy, they're running on like the prices, the inflation, they're running on that. That's the number one issue, not even abortion. And we've talked about this. We looked at the polls. Even abortion after the overturn is not the number one issue for Americans. The number one issue is the economy and inflation. And that's what they are going to run on. And that's why these races are as tight as they are. Didn't answer the question, by the way. Didn't answer the question. What are the Democrats running on besides the Republicans are going to get control and then they're going to turn it into a fascist country? It already is a fascist country, regardless if it's Dems or Republicans in office. This is why the polls are so tight, you guys. This is exactly why, because people see, okay, Joe Biden said he was running on the soul of the nation. We put a Democrat back in the White House, and economically things have gotten worse. And that's what they're going to run on. And then you have some of them who are running on, anti-war. Some of them are running on that.
They for? They want to put Social Security on the chopping block every 5 years, and the other leader comes along and says, no, every year it should be up for grabs.
You also wanted to put Social Security on the chopping block. That video is still available on YouTube if people want to see it. You wanted to take down Social Security and Medicare, Joe Biden. Now, you may have changed your position on it now, but think how many Republicans that you had on your side when you made that speech in the Senate floor. All the Republicans that you had on your side, and you said you worked across the aisle and they agreed with you. So if you want to be upset that Republicans are thinking about taking away Social Security, I want you guys to remember it was Joe Biden who also wanted to take away Social Security along with those Republicans.
Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, these aren't negotiable items in terms of whether they're going to continue them or not. The first thing they said they're going to do is get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so what's that do? They're going to raise drug prices, raise medical costs again, be sure that we're going to no longer be able to have the ability to have tax credits for weatherizing your home, saving money. I mean, I don't know what they're for.
Our reporting, CNN's reporting and the Washington Post reporting suggests that prosecutors think they have enough to charge your son Hunter for tax crimes and a false statement about a gun purchase. Personally and politically, how do you react to that?
Well, first of all, I'm proud of my son. This is a kid who got, not a kid, he's a grown man. He got hooked on, like many families have had happen, hooked on drugs. He's overcome that. He's established a new life.
And he got the opportunity to overcome it and establish a new life. Your son didn't have to go to prison like everyone else that got caught. Your son didn't have to go to prison for 20 years like some of black men have had to because of your crime bill. How was that fair? They weren't given that opportunity. They weren't given a second chance to turn their life around. They were locked up. And some of them still there. And we've spoken to people. There's a gentleman on, he's on Twitter a lot, called Non-Voting Felon. I think he had to change his name. Anywho, he came on RBN last year. He was personally affected by Joe Biden's crime bill. Ruined people's lives. But because because who he is, because he's Joe Biden's son, he got off.
He is, I'm confident that what he says and does are consistent with what happens. For example, he wrote a book about his problems and was straightforward about it. I'm proud of him. He came along and said, by the way, this thing about a gun, I didn't know anything about it, but turns out that when he made my application to purchase a gun, what happened was I guess you get asked, you get asked the question, are you on drugs, you use drugs? He said no. And he wrote about saying no in his book. So I have great confidence in my son. I love him, and he's on a straight and narrow, and he has been for a couple of years now, and I'm just so proud of him.
You're about to turn 80 next month. Happy birthday ahead of time. Whenever anyone raises concerns about your age, you're the oldest president in the history of the United States, you always say, watch me. Voters have been watching you. Democratic voters approve of the job you're doing. Democratic voters overwhelmingly like you. But one poll shows that almost 2/3 of Democratic voters want a new nominee in 2024. And the top reason they gave was your age. So what's your message to Democrats who like you, who like what you've done, but are concerned about your age and the demands of the job?
Well,
they're saying his age, but that's a nicer way of saying his incompetence. That's a nicer way of putting it. People don't feel like he's competent to continue to do the job.
They're concerned about whether or not I can get anything done. Look what I've gotten done. Name me a president in recent history who's gotten as much done as I have in the first 2 years. Not a joke. You may not like what I got done, but the vast majority of the American people do like what I got done.
What did you get done? If you did so much, people wouldn't still be in the economic, like, if Joe Biden did as much as he says that he's done, why are people still struggling? And don't come to me with the stimulus check, because some people didn't even get them, and he didn't even give you the whole $2,000 check. Some people will mention the child tax credit. They cut that short. So if he's done as much as he said that he has done, why are people still struggling? The $10,000 to $20,000 cancellation for student loan debt, that's peanuts. Peanuts. And they've made it difficult for people to apply for it. But not only that, there were all these other rules that they added along with it after it was announced. So certain people who didn't have their student loans consolidated apparently by a certain date didn't qualify for it. That was not mentioned when it was announced. These are things that came out after the fact. So you see the problem?
And so it's a matter of, can you do the job? And I believe I can do the job. I've been able to do the job. I've gotten more done. I got the Inflation Reduction. I got all these pieces of legislation passed. And I ran on that. I said this is what I was going to do. And I'm still getting it done. We've got, dealing with, making sure the veterans get compensated for the
burn pits.
The burn pits, making sure that we're in a situation where we finally have action on guns. And by the way, I'm going to get the assault weapons ban. Before this is over, I'm going to get that again. Not a joke. And watch. And so I just think
you didn't get past what was supposed to get passed. You were supposed to get past Build Back Better, which was already watered down, which we went over that bill as well. That's not what passed. And because of people like Joe Manchin, who's a part of your party, Joe Biden, the bill was drastically reduced. So this Inflation Reduction Act, notice that's the only thing he's mentioning. He said, look what I got passed, the Inflation Reduction Act. That's all he's mentioning.
It's a matter of, has anybody done more in the first 2 years of their administration for a guy who they've been saying this about my age since I began to run. Mm-hmm. And so, you can come work out with me in the morning.
Anytime.
FDR did more. Of course you'll go work out with them. What a joke. What a freaking joke. Now, something has changed. And I saw this earlier today. Now, some of the progressives are actually urging Joe Biden to rethink the Ukraine strategy. Let's go ahead and get into that story. This came out by the Washington Post, so take it with a grain of salt. We all know who owns the Washington Post. Liberals urge Biden to rethink Ukraine strategy. So here we go. Now, like I said, so there's Pamela Jayapal. There's Barbara Lee. You see what's happening, right? A group of 30 House liberals is urging President Biden to dramatically shift his strategy on the Ukraine war and pursue direct negotiations with Russia. My. Isn't that different from where we were just a couple of weeks ago? The first time prominent members of his own party have pushed him to change his approach to Ukraine. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I have no doubt that this is a result of the pressure that has come from the American people. Now, some people didn't like these protests that were happening where people were calling this out. Jose was one of the people. I showed one of the protests on here before where they were confronting AOC. Ayanna Pressley has been confronted. Jamal Bowman has been confronted. Basically, people that are reachable, because obviously these people cannot confront Joe Biden. And they're the ones that voted for it to send the weapons to Ukraine. But now the American people have sat back for months and we've watched you send billions and billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, and people are still suffering right here. We watched you send billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine and you couldn't give us the full $2,000 stimulus check. What? We watched you send billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And even when it came to prescription drug reduction, you only wanted to give it to people who had Medicare. So we've watched you give billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, but you can't give everybody health care in this country. So people are not stupid, and people are seeing what is happening. So when you see these protesters confront congressmen and women about this, about voting for the spending, which has gotten ridiculous, by the way, they have every right to be there, regardless what side they're on. They have every right to call that out. That is a problem. When you have people still being evicted in mass numbers, that is a problem. When people can't afford to buy groceries right now, that is a problem, and you have to call it out. And so I have no doubt. Notice this is coming out now after the pressure has come from the American people. You may not like Jose. You may not like what he stands for, but those call out videos went viral on Twitter. And even AOC drew more attention to it herself. Jamal Bowman drew more attention to it himself. This is why you have to have the pressure from the people. Now, is it just that made this happen? Probably not, but still. For the people who say these things don't work, you have to embarrass them. I'm sorry. It's gotten to this point because being nice to politicians has gotten us nowhere. We've been nice for years. Now it's at the point where you have to embarrass them. You have to call them out and let them know that the jig is up, that you know what's going on. Let me remind you, all of them in Congress, they have health care. So it goes on to say, the letter sent to the White House on Monday and first reported by the Washington Post could create more pressure on Biden as he tries to sustain domestic support for the war effort at a time when the region is heading into a potentially difficult winter and Republicans are threatening to cut aid to Ukraine if they retake Congress. You hear this? Republicans are threatening to cut aid to Ukraine if they retake Congress. The Democratic Party, you're supposed to be the party of anti-war. You're supposed to be the anti-war party. This is the problem. In a letter led by Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the 30 Democrats call on Biden to pair the unprecedented economic and military support to the United States is providing Ukraine with a proactive diplomatic push, redoubling efforts to seek a realistic framework for a ceasefire. So this is something that Rodrigo pointed out earlier in the chat. Notice now that the progressives are calling for, let's do a ceasefire, let's have peace. Notice now it's okay for some of the political pundits to also ask for the same thing. That's because some people take their talking points and their cues from Congress. If the progressives get behind it, then they get behind it. This is why something like Force the Vote was pretty embarrassing for some people, because the progressives wouldn't get behind it. They didn't show up. And notice ever since then, things have changed. Now, if the progressives are not behind it, some of these political pundits are not behind it because they don't want to be embarrassed again. You see how it works? So now more people are like, yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, they need to call for peace. But where were all these peace people 3 months ago? Where were all these peace people 4 months ago, 2 months ago? Where were they? They were cheering on a win. They were cheering for a win from this result. They weren't asking for peace. The Democrats are specifically concerned that the United States is not engaging in regular dialogue with Russia as part of its effort to end a protracted war that has caused thousands of deaths and displaced 13 million people. The Biden administration has been adamant that it is up to Kyiv whether and when to negotiate with Russia, arguing that Ukrainians as a free people should decide their fate. But some Russian experts say Moscow will only negotiate with the United States, a fellow superpower. The lawmakers say that opening must be seized, giving the war spreading devastation. The alternative to diplomacy is protracted war. With both its attendant certainties and, catastrophic and unknowable risk. The liberal Democrats note that the war's disastrous consequences are increasingly felt far beyond Ukraine, including elevated food and gas. I can't talk tonight. Elevated food and gas prices in the United States and spikes in the price of wheat, fertilizer, and fuel that have created global food shortages, not to mention the danger of a nuclear attack by Moscow, which is what some of us have been saying for months. For months. It's affecting everyone. So it's just, you have to call for some type of peace at this point in time. This is absolutely ridiculous. And the American people cannot continue to go through this. This is where we're at now. But notice now it's okay. Now it's okay to make this statement because Congress has made this statement. But a couple of months ago, when some people were calling for peace, it was not okay to talk about that. That's how it works. I'll go ahead and take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. Contribution for the good work Sabby and RBN doing. Thank you so much. And thank you for this tip, Roger Meadows. He's accomplished so much, yet with little results from those accomplishments. He accomplished the child tax credits, but the results were he put a sunset clause to happen in an election year. Mind you, there should have not been an expiration date. I agree. How do you accomplish letting people be kicked out of their homes when I didn't provide a financial safety net to allow tenants to stay in their homes? I stopped UI. Sabby, speaking of Northrop Grumman, that movie studio I told you about here in Nassau County when I sent you a vid and a pic of 1984 Ghostbusters vehicle. Right by that, there's a whole Grumman site here. Since World War II, the local newspaper Grumman, aka MIC, has poisoned the soil and ground H2O throughout East Nassau since 1980s. When you say MIC is the biggest polluter, you don't lie. We got firsthand experience. That's right. That's right. And thank you for the super chat, Nam. I don't know what it is with this administration between him and Kamala. Not a single coherent sentence was said. I hear you. I feel you, Nam. I feel you. Okay, I think Gloria is here. Gloria, if you are ready, just give me a thumbs up. All right, let me go ahead and bring your page up here. All right, I'll add you to the stream. Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sabby. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for coming on. All right, guys, my special guest tonight is Gloria Caballero-Roca. She is running for Massachusetts State Auditor as a Green Rainbow candidate. Welcome so much, Gloria.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for a huge audience that you're, educating and instructing and supporting the people, and talking their language. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I have learned so much from you. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. So please educate all of us. You are running for state auditor through the Green Rainbow Party. What's the difference between Green Rainbow and the Green Party, or is it kind of one and the same?
Well, Green Rainbow and Green Party, it's a coalition, It was first the Green Rainbow, and they decided to work with people with like-minded opinions around environment, around LGBTQI plus, et cetera, et cetera. I am a new member of the party because I think my values and their values align. I don't have a long history with them, but when I see that they put people, before profit and the environment and peace, as you were talking about, then I said, this is an opportunity for me to keep, speaking out and representing people in my community. I come from, I am Cuban, first of all, and I've lived in Western Massachusetts in Holyoke. So it's mostly Hispanic. And when I saw that the Green Party talked about including people who really want to make a difference and be independent from the two major corporate parties, that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to run with them, and I'm going to make sure that if it is a coalition, I am sure that it goes across the board with people who really want to make change, see happen and make change, contribute to those changes here in the Commonwealth.
Awesome. Now, I do want to go ahead and pull up your website really quick here. So one of the things that I found interesting, this position here, auditor, can you explain to everyone why this? I think this is an important position because it deals with taxes here in Massachusetts, and people do kind of refer to us as Taxachusetts for people who are not aware. What are you hoping to accomplish with this position?
Well, it's not only, taxes and bookkeeping. I hope to make sure that we really do bottom line audits. So it's not only the bookkeeping, but it's also we have to audit the people and read the mission and vision of all the programs and units and divisions that run with taxpayers' money, right? So it's not only if they keep the books, if they're doing their job, keeping all the receipts, et cetera, but it's really also introducing the fact that we can be an agent of change as auditor here in Massachusetts. We have to audit the people. Are you receiving all the services, and are they delivering on the promises that they have made? Are you receiving securing housing and jobs? Are your schools still under receivership? What are those programs doing that are delivering real results for the people? That's number one. And number two, I would like to set up a citizens audit panel. And this is going to be made up by the people who are specialists, in different programs, in housing, in criminal justice system, in healthcare providing, et cetera, so that the people, audit the bureaucrats, audit the politicians. And I want to make sure that this is an office that is going to work for the people. It's not going to be a cozy relationship with politicians who are going to be audited, but rather it's going to make sure that politicians know that the people have a voice and that they should know what they do with their taxpayers' money, if their monies are being invested in what is needed here in Massachusetts. You were talking about the war in Ukraine and all the money that's being divested, everything that is being, invested, that is polluting the air and the quality of life, the water here in Holyoke, for instance. So that is what I want to accomplish. First of all, we don't get money from the big party, donors. We are independent. This is a grassroots campaign. It comes from, the neighborhoods, the barrios, and the people who are struggling. And this is across the board because everyone's struggling in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of wars that are, unstoppable, and in the middle of a crisis that is putting a huge dent in our pockets. Food is going up. Gas prices are going up, but salaries are still low. So that's what I want to accomplish: transparency, accountability, and this is the work of the people. This is with the people and for all of the people. We have to get together and as a union just demand our rights, and we have to know that we have the power. Regardless of what we look like, where we come from, we have to get together behind, just the voice of unity. We are, as I say, sacred creations, and we need to keep building on, just create that spiritual and political agora that is so needed in these times, Sabrina.
What are some of the needs for people that live in Western Massachusetts? And I ask this because a lot of times when I tell people I live in the Boston area, they think of Massachusetts, they only think of Boston, and there's a whole other part of the state. What are some of the needs that are important to people in Western Mass?
Yeah, so right now I'm a member of Neighbor to Neighbor. We've been working here not only in Holyoke, but also in Springfield, in Chicopee, in Pittsfield, people want better housing. People are fed up with the rent going up and people getting evicted from their homes. People really want better jobs and better infrastructures here in Western Massachusetts. I live 10 minutes from a place that's called Tokeniki here in Holyoke. And these people, when I was door knocking last year, when I ran as a mayor, for Holyoke, they said, we've been with these roads for the last 10 years without being repaved. That's infrastructure. The schools here in Holyoke and in Western Mass, they are suffering from underfunded. Here in Holyoke, we've been under receivership for the past 7 years. Today, there was news that in South Hadley, and this is 5 minutes from where I live, teachers and paraprofessionals are going out. They were rallying because they don't get the treatment that they deserve. They don't get the payment that they deserve. And it's a huge responsibility. So it's housing, it's quality of the water. Here in Holyoke, every time that there is floods, there's discharge from the sewage system into the Connecticut River that is polluting, the waters, and people are fishing or bathing in the river. But ultimately, whenever we have to use those extra filtered systems so that we can have a more purified water. So it's, if you extrapolate what happens here in Western Massachusetts with housing and lack of funded schools, and then you have low payment for people who really do, important jobs here in Western Massachusetts. And when we're still in the middle of a pandemic, Holyoke was one of the most, a place that was really hard hit by the pandemic, where at the Soldiers' Home, 77 of our veterans die. So you extrapolate, that's a microcosm of what is going on, in the rest of the country. So it's not only Boston, it's central Massachusetts and it's Western Massachusetts. I've been, interviewing and working with people in Pittsfield, that's in the Berkshires. There's a large Hispanic community there, and they talk about racism. There's not language justice when it comes to people who don't speak English. And if you don't understand the system, you don't know how to navigate the system. So you lose all the services that, programs that are out there that can benefit you, that can support you, and help you, go through different stages. So they talked about food insecurity. There's no easy access to fresh food and fruits and vegetables for, children. And there's also senior discrimination when it comes to housing. I have friends in North Adams who've been struggling getting, some support because they've been discriminated in terms of how much they have to pay, in terms of accessibility to their houses. These are problems that are not new here in Massachusetts. These are real problems that are affecting, real people, and real people who struggle every day to put a plate of food on their, on the table in their houses. That's why all these, Sabrina, inspired me to run again. I ran last year to become the mayor of the city. And then I got inspired because I saw, well, nothing has changed. Someone has to step up and speak out. And if it's me, I'll do it again. And regardless of the results, I will continue fighting, and working and try to effect some changes here in the Commonwealth.
Well said. I want to show people the map here so people understand which area we're talking about here. So typically, like I said, when people think about Massachusetts, they think about Boston, like the eastern Massachusetts, this area over here. But there's a whole other part of the state where people also live. And so going past Worcester, you have Springfield here.
Yes.
And there's Holyoke. So this is the area that Gloria is referring to. And I feel like, I'm not kidding, I feel like once you get past like Worcester, the rest of the state is forgotten about.
Yes. And this is sort of, I don't want to make up a term here, but when it comes to geographic subjects, as someone, put it one day, you feel like in Cuba we say there's a cradle and there's a baby, right? So the cradle and the baby are together. If you only focus on you're in the capital, then you think that the rest is just scenery or how to say, just embellishment of the geography. So, but you forget that there are people who live there. You forget that these are lands that belong to the indigenous people of this land. You forget that there's so many issues that need to be addressed. And that it's not only the Boston area, because there are people struggling in the Boston area, in Lowell, in Mattapan, in Dorchester, in Lynn, where there's a huge campaign run by Neighbor to Neighbor around housing. But we need to start putting all the dots together. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not only the city, the capital of the Commonwealth, which is Boston, and the beautiful streets, with all the boutiques, etc., etc. It's made up of real people. And these real people live, throughout the entire state. People who have trouble finding, transportation to get to their jobs. People who breathe and have dreams and passions, and they have plans for the future. And this is important to talk about geography, because then when you talk about geography, there's a sprawling realization that we, the people, need to understand that problems are not only fixed or focused in the capital where the administration or Beacon Hill is. And that is why it's so hard for those politicians to come all the way here. I appreciate Jenny Jackson, the person who was running for a Secretary of State. She came all the way to Holyoke. I would really appreciate it. When I went to Pittsfield in the Berkshires, people were so appreciative of the fact that there are people out here, even though I'm not in the Boston area, but people who are seeking office, running for office, really see the need to connect with the people. And that is the lack of the disconnect that really exists when we talk about government, and some agencies of the government in Boston with respect to the rest of the geography and the people and their needs and the job that needs to be done in the rest of the, of the state. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Thanks a lot, Sabrina. Thanks.
There's a statement here that says, I will be accountable to all the residents of Massachusetts, not just the insiders who dominate Beacon Hill. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I want to run because I feel that there's so much that resonates with who I am as a human being, as a Cuban-born, as an immigrant, as a Hispanic person, as a mother, and as someone who was single parent when I was 19. So that's why my struggle, people's struggle, coexist. I want to really fight for people who are struggling with opioid pandemic, et cetera, right? So when you are an independent candidate and you don't owe money or favors or carry favor to the big party machines out there that are funded by corporations, you don't have to be accountable to those kinds of, structures. You work for the people, with the people. And when the people see that there's common sense, that there's honesty, that you understand their suffering and you understand where they come from, and you understand also that they have dreams and visions for the future, when the people see that, then they rely on you. There's this faith that, yes, together we can make change. But if we keep relying and, keep being accountable to those two parties, then we don't move on. We don't effect any change. And what needs to happen is the reverse. We are servants. We are public servants. We need to be accountable to the people. And this has to be the same way the two major parties go out there and express who they are. They are public servants. We are the majority. We hold the power. Actually, we are power brokers. Once we understand that, I, as a public servant, I'm coming from the people who suffer and people who have struggles, and who've been through different phases in our lives that have not been easy. I understand that I need to represent the people, and I have to be accountable to the people who elected me, not to those who were funded by monies that were taken from our taxpayers and that were invested in things that we really didn't sign up for. That is what I mean when I say I will be accountable to the people, not to the two major parties, on Beacon Hill.
Well said. One of the things I did want to ask you about your experience in Cuba. I feel like in the United States, Cuba gets a bad rap, um, meaning that there are statements that people will make here, like, "Oh God, like they want us to become a socialist country like Cuba. That's what they're going to do to us if certain people get into power." And I want to hear about like your experience living in Cuba, because there are things that Cubans have in Cuba that we just don't have here in the United States. Like we don't have healthcare for everybody. And that's a big one, I think, for me, for a lot of people. What was your experience like living in Cuba? And could you debunk some of these myths that people might have about it?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in 1966. My mom, and I'm the third one of four siblings. So my mom was a single parent. At 19, I had my first child, and while I was going to college. So what happened was that my mom said, "Okay, you're gonna have your child, and you're gonna graduate from college." In Cuba, there's a system that is hands-on when it comes to practicing medicine. We don't have a lot because we've been embargoed for over 60 years. We have our internal issues and problems and lack of, trust. And there's also corruption. I can say that. But there's also the fact that whatever we have is due to our preventive medicine. When you have preventive medicine, like in Cuba, when you have a doctor and a nurse per block, and your patient, their relatives, you know every inch of what is in their body, and you become sort of like an extended family with a doctor and the nurse of your block. It lends itself for you to rely on someone that really has the expertise and the willingness to say, "I will take care of you, and I will make sure that your blood pressure does not go up, because I will preventively." And it becomes sort of like an organic relationship where prevention, it becomes part of who you are, your life, your identity. I don't want to get sick, so I want to walk. I want to stop smoking. I want to, diminish the doses of sugar or coffee or whatever. So that's prevention. And mind you, thanks to the embargo, because we don't have all that we need, all the resources, is how I grew up with in Cuba. So we have universal health care, right? We don't have all the medicines, but we do have universal health care. We have a system whereby you go from daycare through college for free. That's why I was able to graduate in Cuba as a simultaneous interpreter and translator. Otherwise, if I'd lived here in the United States, I don't know what would have been, my life, being a single parent at 19, and things would be a different story. Not only that, they left me to teach at the same university I graduated from, and I did that for 7 years, right when the collapse of the communist bloc. So that's my experience. You have all these specialists in Cuba, but they say, okay, the doctor makes the appointment for you to see the specialist. You just go there. You have the right to tell the specialist, this is where it hurts. So please take a look at this. Here in the United States, when I go to the doctors, they hardly look at me because they are overworked. They are overbooked, and they are, there's always that time clicking. So it's only 15 minutes for you, and that's it. And the more people I see, perhaps the more I make. But in Cuba, it's not the amount of people you see. It is how much time you devote to that person to understand what is going on, and also to culturally, understand how that person would like you to treat them or her or him. So there's that symbiotic and that synergy that is cultural, that it's also, ethnic, and it's also, why not, religious, but it's also the fact that all that gets, intertwined when it comes to medical assistance, when it comes to you going to the doctors. Sometimes doctor used to tell me, "So Gloria, please don't drink more water, walk more, and make sure you just take a bath, cleansing bath." So that there's this, communion also. And that's what's happening in Cuba. It's an island that's been embargoed for over 60 years. It's also an island that has their internal problems, and lack of understanding and new initiatives in terms of opening up to the new world we're living in. But it's also an island that is doing a lot of work, in terms of how to prevent diseases. And also, I should mention here that there's a school of medicine in Cuba whereby many United States students of low-income families go to Cuba to study medicine. And the result is that they practice medicine that is community-oriented, that is people-centered, and that is not, it's not relationship of patient. It's the relationship between the patient and the doctor, and not the consumer and the provider. Just a change in language in this neoliberal, system we live in. When you have that dichotomy whereby you're not the patient, but you are the customer, and the doctor is not the doctor, but the provider, then you have that mechanism of money, of marketplace. And of course, there's not prevention. There's money making.
Right. That's right. That's right. It's a money-making industry. Why did you decide to run as a third-party candidate instead of through the two-party system?
Well, I used to be a Democrat, and I also voted Democrats. But I noticed they worked so hard. They really worked very hard to lose their elections, to make sure that Republicans win. They work really hard to fund Republicans that are weak opponents, to them, to just make sure that they win. They work so hard, disconnected with the people who vote for them. They are really disconnected with what is happening on the ground with people in different, neighborhoods here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's not only Boston or Lowell or Mattapan or Dorchester or Lynn, but it's also Worcester, and it's also Windsor and Pittsfield and Adams and North Adams, and it's also Florence and Northampton and Chicopee and Springfield and so many more. They worked so hard not to pay attention, to our demands, that I decided this is a joke, and this is insulting to our intelligence. This is really how our democracy, the democracy that we all work so hard, for every day of our lives, even if you're not a politician, because you want to have a better housing, you want to talk to your neighbor, you want to really become a better human being. But they work so hard, Sabrina, to just debunk our dreams and just to make us fail, that I decided it's not worthy for me to carry that name. And it's a shame. It is really a shame when they talk about progressive Democrats or justice Democrats. It is also a sham. It is a shame that they all vote for wars. They're pro-war. They invest in money. They're divesting our money instead of investing in us, in what is really needed in our communities, in the whole country. I'm just going to limit myself to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But they work so hard to disregard our demands in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an economic crisis. And how much the young people need to get involved into this, because we're talking about the need for the young people to understand that even if you're a Democrat, but you see that your dreams are not being, are not become true, but you see that your voices are not taken care, are not being heard, but you see that you are not part of the conversation. It's time for us to get to that awakening moment, right? And create a new agora that is, like I said, it's spiritual, it is communal, and it's most of all political, so that we can get together and as a people demand that we are here to make a change, to really make something that is meaningful for us, for our children, for our neighbors, and for future generations. That is why I'm running with, the Green Party, a Green Party that believes in grassroots movements, in grassroots democracy, that believe in independent people that think differently, and that really want to see, all the voices being represented. That is why I'm doing this with the Green Party, Sabrina.
Yeah, I can imagine too, out in Western Mass, like it's easier to have, I would say, like a tighter or stronger sense of community. Boston can be very transient. So people come in, people move here, they're here for like a year or 2 years, and then they leave and they'll go to another city. Like I've been here for over 11 years, so I've seen a lot of people come and a lot of people go. But I have noticed, like, it seems like once you get further away from Eastern Massachusetts, there seems to be more of a sense of community because people aren't just moving there to do like a tech job or to attend a college. Like, there are actually people there that either are from that area that stayed there, or people who really want to be a part of a community. When we look at like the cost of living in Massachusetts. So I know it's a problem across the United States, but in Massachusetts, like, the housing situation is particularly high. And it's not just, I want people to know it's not just Boston, because what has been happening is you have people from Boston that have been moving out to Western Mass because that's where they can afford to like buy a home. And so now it's like, now rent and home prices are starting to increase as you go further west in the state as well. So this is what I was telling people before. This housing crisis that we have, it follows you. You can leave Boston and move somewhere else to get, but then next thing you know, then that area starts to get expensive because people are moving there. What do you think the state should do in reference to the housing centric situation here and gentrification?
Well, there's so much that the state should do. First of all, people talk here about rent control, and they also talk about the need for the youth to be benefited by rent control. They want to live in their own houses or apartments, but they want to be independent and be able to afford it. So what the state should do is to make sure that they put a cap on how much people are forced to pay in order to buy a living space. If the state is not intervening, if the state is not making sure that, okay, how much are we going to invest in making sure that we build affordable housing, that we build housing, or that we repair and we renew and we recover with retrofit systems, and that is green. How much are we willing to invest in that? The state should do that. They should look after, its citizens, the people. The state also should facilitate the fact that people have the right to talk about living, in co-ops. That people have the right to buy, land trust, and just make sure that they, guarantee a living that is communal, that they are in control of. Of course, we're talking about slum landlords, people who just don't care about the living spaces. What is my city doing? For instance, here in Holyoke, it's hard for us to follow where these owners, landlords live. They don't take care. They just don't take care of their buildings. There's also a lot of trash around the buildings, and it's been a struggle for us to really follow the tracks of those slumlords, landlords. So the government has a lot that they can do to improve, in order to improve our living conditions. What is being happening in Western Massachusetts is, as we said, as a result of the pandemic, people are moving from east to west. But these are people that can afford, buying homes here in Western Massachusetts or duplexes. These are people who come with money, and they not only come from Boston, they come from, New York. And what's happening with those communities that have been here for decades, Sabrina, they have been forced to leave, their communities because, as you said, the housing crisis follows them, and I don't know if they have to, and it's sort of like a wave that pushed them out of their communities, where the fabric of the social fabric of their communities is broken, and the children see that they are uprooted from a community where they felt comfortable. They played outside. So what are we doing? We need programs that support affordable living, decent housing, where the environment is also part of that living condition in those houses. Here in Holyoke, Sabrina, we have buildings that are right next to places where 18-wheelers park. So you have this huge, parking lot for 18-wheelers. And then you have these buildings. It's lower income people, working class people, and nothing's being done. We also have spaces where there's plight, there's humidity, there's so much going on. And the city, what can the city do if those are spaces that are private? So what we can do is just to fight as a community, to organize, to mobilize. It's not only the state who needs to do the job, it's also us. It's on us. We need to really organize and, as we say, take the bull by the horns and say, we deserve decent living and decent housing. We deserve water that is not contaminated or polluted like we have here in Holyoke. We deserve a space for our children where they are able to play and not in potholes like we have here in Holyoke or in Springfield or in Chicopee, where they just play and innocently they get sick. We need spaces that are livable and that are green and that are sustainable, where we as a community can plant, our own garden and grow our own food. We cannot do that because the housing conditions are not good, because the soil is contaminated where we live, and because the water is also polluted. It is the state, but it's also on us. Let us get together. We are the people. We have voices, you guys. We can make changes. And if it takes, I don't know, just going out there and rally every day and knock on people's doors and gather signature, let us do it. It's for our own sake. No one's going to do it if we don't do it. And no one's going to respect us if we don't make the system respect and work for us. This is what I think should happen.
Well said. So election day, it's around the corner.
I know.
Are you on the ballot or are you write-in candidate?
No, I am on the ballot.
Okay.
I am on the ballot. We were able to gather those 5,000 signatures. I'm so grateful of all the people who gave us their signatures because they trusted us, because they saw that we've been working hard and that it is worth it. It is an experiment of self-governing, and this is what needs to happen. This is also a reason why I believe that we can effect some changes here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. People need to start seeking independent candidates. We have to start working together with people who come from grassroots, from the barrios, from neighborhoods that are underfunded, because even though we are not politicians, we have been at the receiving end of their mistrust, of their mismanagement, of their discrimination. And that is why I think it is so important that we get together as a people and say, we know how we can change this mess. And we are going to tell you how this should happen. Yes.
That's right. That's right. And you can donate to Gloria's campaign here. Eric, can you put that link to that site in the chat? Again, for those just joining, Gloria is running as a Green Rainbow candidate here in Massachusetts for state auditor. So for those of you who are watching who live in Massachusetts with me, Gloria is on the ballot. So if you know, I know you guys are, a lot of you are done with the two-party system. You can vote for Gloria for state auditor. So Gloria, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. Very well said. We need to get more. I try to get more local people to come on as well. We definitely need to get more local candidates on as well.
I really appreciate you, Sabrina. Thank you so much. And please vote November 8th for Gloria Caballero-Roca for state auditor for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Blessings. Have a good night. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Thanks so much, Gloria. All right, guys. Again, those of you here in Massachusetts, you know what to do. You know what to do. All right. Let me go ahead and grab. I saw a comment here. Thank you so much for the super chat, Ro. Solidarity, keep getting the word out. Peace. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ro. And if there's anything on Rockfin, any comments on Rockfin, Eric, let me know and I can grab those. If not, I am moving on to the next story. All right, guys. We're going to talk about Professor Richard Wolff. He had a discussion. You know, guys, I usually cover him at least once a week. But he had a discussion recently with RJ. Yes, he's on RJ's show a lot. I know you guys are like, he's always on RJ's show. Yeah, he's on RJ's show a lot. But he had a discussion with RJ about the Cold War, the new Cold War. And this is actually coming off of the Biden story that we just covered. I want you to hear what Professor Richard Wolff says about the possibility of something like this happening again and comparing it to the old Cold War to what we may have now. So check this out. Forget that RJ has music. RJ's questions are long. There we go.
Profit?
Well, I think, like most things, it's certainly not only about money and profit. I think those things have a great deal to do with it, but they always spark other things, money and profit, and then those other things work their influence, and pretty soon you have a rich soup of factors. Mostly in my brain, when things happen, there's an enormous number of contributing factors, and you and I can differ on which ones we emphasize, but explaining it altogether is probably not something human beings can do any more than we can jump over tall buildings. And I wouldn't lose all that much sleep about it. We do the best we can. We look at the factors that strike us as relevant. And then the arguments about what has more relevance than another, that's a dead end. You really can never go there, because in order to know how important one factor is relative to all the other possible factors, you'd actually have to look at all the factors and measure them. Since the number of all relevant factors is huge, unknown but huge, most of us will not live long enough to do that even once, let alone for many topics. So it's a sterile thing, and I'm not going to take us there. I can't. It literally makes no sense to me. Having said that, something definitely is going on. I mean, today's headlines are about more Biden administration sanctions against China, prohibitions of Chinese companies selling their equipment here in the United States. We all know the work against Russia through the Ukrainian war and all of that. There seems to have been a decision made in Washington, as usual, without much knowledge by the rest of us, even those of us who pay a lot of attention, that whatever was the policy before, working things out, negotiating, working things out economically, that policy has been changed. It was changed clearly and obviously under Mr. Trump, and there is now 2 years of evidence that Mr. Biden is more like Mr. Trump than unlike him when it comes to these kinds of issues.
There you go. So you see, even Professor Wolff is letting you know these decisions are just being made that affect and impact the American people. They're not really trying to negotiate anymore, especially in reference to Ukraine, Russia, and with China. They're making some rash decisions. And I still say this, Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan, Ed Markey also going to Taiwan, although he kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Like his wasn't as public as hers was, but escalating tensions, right, with China. Was that necessary? No, it was not. But here we go. It is clear that they have already chosen a side, what side they're going to be on, which could be hurtful to all of us. Like, that's the thing. We're the ones that will be affected. And they're just making these decisions. So Professor Richard Wolff is letting you know, did we really get that much difference from Trump and Biden? Because Joe Biden has actually continued some of Trump's policies. If we look at the immigration issue, the kids in cages, they're still in cages. They're just in cages under a different president. So people are making these choices and making these decisions. And there used to be this type of let's work together or let's try to negotiate with this country in some way, shape, or form. But no, it's just outright defiance. And this is, again, what is so incredibly dangerous when it comes to foreign policy and the president of the United States, because they can act alone.
As far as I can tell, and here I'm put on my hat as a professional economist, what I see is the behavior of, and you and I have talked about this before, but I see here the behavior of an economy that has its best days behind it, and a society that is losing its global political position, its global power, its economic importance. Now, you can quickly say, well, this has been going on for a while. That's true. But like everything else, it can go on for a while and still leave open the broad picture. I think what's happened now is little changes have accumulated, and now the hugeness of what it all means is being played out in a way that people are going to sit up and take notice. Every one of the leading industries in the United States, typically high-tech industries, Google, Apple, all of them, have a counterpart in China that is as efficient or more efficient, as profitable or more profitable, as large or larger than.
Yeah, this is important to note because this is something that my students actually told me as well. So I had a lot of students. At one point, I had a lot of students that were from China, and they explained this to me as well. Like, they were like, I can stay here in the United States and get a job here, but I can also just go back home. We have those things back home too. So it's a competitor with the United States, right? And in some areas has actually passed the United States. So the United States sees that, United States government sees that as a threat. Because the reality is, and they may not say this outright, but the reality is the US government doesn't want any other country to be the power in the world. They don't want any other country to hold the economic purse. They don't want any other country to be a superpower. They want to be the ones that is the superpower that dominates the rest of the world. And any country that comes close to that, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, the United States government is going to try their best to suppress them, if not remove them.
The American company. We've not seen that before. The United States, for almost a century, has been not only the biggest, but the richest, the most technologically pushing the envelope, all of those things. And first one and then the other isn't true anymore. And it's beginning to be so clear, so obvious, that the latest small decision now takes on a size, an implication that really isn't about it, but about the sudden realization of what all those little steps for 5 or 10 years add up to. Let me give you 2 or 3 examples.
But you know what? It's our fault. Well, not us personally, but it's the US fault because, we had strong manufacturing in this country at one point in time. Before you and I were born, well, most of you. I don't know how old everyone is, but if you're like me and you're a millennial, we haven't experienced what it used to be, right? So there was a point in a time in this country where things were made in America. The auto parts were made in America. Clothing made in America. And what happened over time, some of these CEOs decided to get greedy and realized, you know what? I can actually lay off some of these employees if I can find a way to make these products cheaper. And then you had NAFTA under Bill Clinton. So the idea to take these companies, these jobs, and ship them overseas killed manufacturing in this country. And I want to be clear what I say when I say that. Yes, we still do have manufacturing in this country, but it is nothing like the way it used to be. You have to go back and look at the history of the Rust Belt. Some of you in the chat, you may know your grandparents, some of you, your parents may have worked at those factories. I'm talking Pittsburgh, I'm talking Cleveland, I'm talking Chicago, I'm talking Baltimore, I'm talking all that industrial power that we had in the United States, gone. You can drive through some of these towns in the US and you can see the devastation. Just memories of what used to be. These old factory towns and these old mill towns, gone. Because why? Because capitalism, because people got greedy. And so now you have a country like China that has continued for a long time making their own shit. And so for them, they're just like, you want to send your jobs to us? Okay, cool. And they continue to grow. And we became more dependent on other countries for goods and products and services. So whose fault is it really? How can we get mad and upset with China when they just basically took advantage of something that we gave them to begin with?
A week or so ago, the OPEC plus 23 countries that include Russia and Saudi Arabia and everybody else who's a major player, Mexico, Venezuela, Iraq, so on. They were basically approached by the United States and Great Britain. Would they please increase the production of oil, which they are the right ones to ask, because that's what they are. They are the world's major oil producers. And the explanation given to them, very typical, the kind of explanation given in the past, was we don't want to have a bad recession. A bad recession is looming in good part because inflation is making it impossible for people to afford buying the quantity of stuff they used to. Interest rates going up to deal with inflation further stifle economic activity. So please, help the world out. Be a good global citizen, you oil producers, and pump more oil in. It'll drive the price down a ways, and that'll offset the inflation, and we will be in less dire trouble. In other words, the problem is global, and the solution is in your hands. The 23 countries debated a very short time, a day or two, and reached the conclusion that pretty much everything the British and the US had said to them was not the way they saw the world, was not in that sense true, but even more ominous, whether it was or not, their interests lay somewhere else, namely in reducing the quantity of oil in the world, which would presumably drive up its price and therefore not only not lessen the inflation, but actually reinforce the inflation. They cut oil production. I believe a unanimous decision, or if not, then very close to one. They cut it by 2 million barrels of oil per day. The total amount of oil produced per day, roughly 90 million. So this is a better than 2% cut. That's more than enough to stimulate people around the world, countries, companies, to start bidding up the price of oil, because if you're cutting back oil, you don't want to be the one. You could be sitting, I don't know, I'll pick a country somewhere in Japan. You need to import X million barrels of oil. You don't want to be the one who gets no oil. Therefore, you'll go right away to whoever your oil supplier is and say, look, whatever the price of oil is right now, I'll give you $3 more a barrel if you give me a signed contract committing to ship me X quantity on 10 tankers over the next 6 to 12 months. All right? Which means these are known events. That'll make somebody in, I don't know, New Zealand, who also has to buy oil, realize what his competitor in Japan just did and offer $4 more.
Right.
You see what it's
Sure.
classic. So this is important. Number one, it means that the inflation and the rising interest rates that have led to the prediction nearly universal now of a recession starting next year. And remember, next year is 3 months away.
That's right. And notice Professor Wolff said recession, not slight recession like Joe Biden did.
Right.
We are, that's worse now than it was before. Number two, the inflation is getting worse.
Yep.
Number three, the pressure on the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates is getting worse. But
Yep.
the most important thing of all, that little fact that now takes on this enormous number, these 23 countries have just, if you pardon me, given the United States the proverbial finger. We're not doing what you want. We're doing what's good for us. We think you wanted us to increase oil because that's good for you. We're not here to do good for you. That's the way we behaved in the past, but we don't have to anymore. And we don't want to anymore. And we're not going to anymore. You know, for Americans, each of these little moments, and I could give you half a dozen other examples if you wish, but each of them is adding up to a recognition that whether you use your interesting phrase, a new Cold War, or the question, I believe it's in today's New York Times, of their columnist, Friedman, who kind of asks incredulously, are we going to take on Russia and China at the same time? Because
yeah, are we being insane? Like, seriously. Like, this is the thing. This is what people are wondering, right? Is this what the Biden administration, because that's who's in office right now, is this what the Biden administration is trying to do right now? Can you imagine? Like, this is crazy. This is why I told you guys, like, when Nancy Pelosi made that trip to Taiwan, I was like, this is insane. We already have escalating tensions with Russia, and now you decide to jet set to Taiwan to piss off China? You want to piss off two major countries right now to come after us? It doesn't make any sense. And these are the people who are leading the country.
Because, you know, the first brain says, that's not smart. Russia is the largest country on earth by geography.
Right.
China is the largest country on earth by population. And the two of them are in an ever-tightening alliance with India, which is the second largest country by population and about to overtake China, I believe, this year or next. Do you really want to be aligned in an economic and political and military struggle under those terms? Let me remind you about who we have gone to war against one way or another. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya. We're talking about the poorest countries on earth who have no army or navy or air force at all, who
That's right.
dream of nuclear weapons but don't have any. Russia and China are the opposite of all of that.
Exactly. It was easy to take on those other countries for the United States government because they lack the resources. They don't have a strong military. So, of course, they would go after the countries that they knew didn't really have the resources to fight back and win, right? Okay. Russia and China do. Okay. Russia and China do. If the United States government really thinks, if the Biden administration really thinks that they could take on both of them at the same time, they're insane. And this is just about profit. That's what this is about. They are willing to risk more lives. And for all of you who have joined the military, they're willing to put your life at risk for something that they know they can't win. Just so the United States government can make more money, can help weapon contractors, just to help out Lockheed Martin, just to help out Northrop Grumman, just to help out Raytheon. That's what this is really about. Never forget that. Never mistake that. When it comes to this country, war is about profit. It is about money. It is not just about let's go in and be the good guys and help the poor little people. It's never about that. It is about profit. That is why they escalated. That is why they can't wait to do it. Joe Biden hasn't even been in office for 3 years, and he's already got us into one conflict and possibly another one on the way. He couldn't wait. He couldn't wait. It's all about money. That's why.
As India is coming to be also. Therefore, whoa, what is going on? Last point. The war, the Cold War, had a kind of ideological logic to it. We were told, you and I, our generation, the American people, that there was a great struggle between capitalism and democracy and all of those things, which we were told go together, against this other evil thing, socialism, communism, dictatorship, authoritarian, totalitarian, right? We had a picture of a great struggle. We can't do that now. I mean, that's not available. India isn't a socialist or communist country. Russia gave that up explicitly. China, well, we can debate what China is. China has never called itself a communist country. China refers to itself, as Russia always did, as a socialist system. But that's only the beginning of the ideological confusion here. The people that are arrayed against us in Russia are mostly private capitalist enterprises, and the government they control. And likewise in India, and again, depending on your debates, how far China is from that is a debatable matter. So we're not going to have this uniformity. We're going to have to sequentially demonize Putin, Xi Jinping, Mr. Modi in India, and we're going to have to go on because there's more and more countries lining up somewhere else. It should have been a warning to us when a few months ago a special meeting was arranged under pressure from the U.S. for all the countries in Africa. And if you add them all up, there were quite a few. I believe it's 80 or 90. I don't know exactly. A large number, maybe 70. And they were asked to have a meeting to send their top political leaders to hear a speech by Mr. Zelensky in Ukraine about the importance of lining up with the West.
This is what I was talking about a couple of nights ago, how they were talking to leaders of African countries, trying to get them on board too. And for those who don't know, African countries decided to remain neutral with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. So they're trying to get them to basically join sides with Ukraine. And Africa was like, what the fuck? Didn't we tell you we're neutral? We don't want anything to do with this. You're not getting our people killed. So you see what's happening, right?
The fight with Russia. Out of the whatever the number of African countries is, a total of 4 attended the meeting. There is no support for the US and the UK in Ukraine.
Say it again. Say it one more time. This needs to be said.
The US, for all the countries in Africa, and if you add them all up, there were quite a few. I believe it's 80 or 90. I don't know exactly. A large number, maybe 70. And they were asked to have a meeting to send their top political leaders to hear a speech by Mr. Zelensky in Ukraine about the importance of lining up with the West in the fight with Russia. Out of the whatever the number of African countries is, a total of 4 attended the meeting. There is no support for the US and the UK in Ukraine.
No support. No support. People aren't coming to back the United States with this particular conflict the way the US government thought that they would. So what does that tell you? I don't blame Africa. I would stay neutral too. I was like, I have nothing to do with this. This is your war. You handle it. So what that means is that if the United States, if the Biden administration decides to escalate this instead of calling for some type of peace negotiations, I don't see too many people on our side. Lauren said, leave Africa and Brittany alone. You guys remember that video? Leave Brittany alone. Yeah, leave Africa alone. Stay away from them. Just stay away. Look, people see what's going on globally. I got to tell you, I lived overseas. America's not that well liked with good reason. So you got your hand in Russia and Ukraine. You're trying to piss the fuck off with China, and you're trying to invade Haiti. So much for running on the soul of the nation, Joe Biden.
The interests of the African countries in their relationships with Russia and China, either both of them or one or the other, coupled with the fact that for them, this is a European squabble that has nothing to do with them, that they had nothing to do with causing, and that they do not want to suffer for. Not at all. And they are now in a position to tell the United States, with whom they have often perfectly good relations, from whom they may get foreign aid, we're not doing this. And if you stop giving it to us, that's a price we're willing to pay. You know, you at a certain point, if you don't face the declining situation you are actually in, you are going to make catastrophic miscalculations about what's happening. You're going to give instructions to your ambassadors, to your negotiators, that gives them the impression that you have the ability to carry through on the threats that they're making, but you don't.
And they're willing to do it, and they're willing to sell all of us out just for money. Just for profit, just for money. The name of that video, if you want to see the full video, the full interview, because it's 42 minutes, it is Professor Richard Wolff on the new Cold War. And that's on the 0 Hour with RJ. So definitely check it out if you want to see the full interview there. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Angela says, my whole town was full of industry and factories. Over the last 50 years, they have dwindled to 3 or 4 of the super corporate ones who bust unions and contract out for labor. Believe it. Cobra Commander, what's really sad is Venezuela and Russia have enough oil to supply the world, but that would mean actually paying those nations the wealth they're deserved. Imagine that, Cobra. Bad cookies. They don't care, Sabby. They will kill us all to keep their profits. There you go. And Robert Templeton, slight conflict, World War III. For those just tuning in, we were making fun of Joe Biden earlier saying that we might have a slight recession. I'm like, what the fuck is a slight recession? I'm sorry. We are going on to our final story tonight, which is Bernie Sanders' interview here with Jake Tapper. I don't know why Jake Tapper is the one that's having to do all these interviews for the past 2 weeks, but this is what's happening. Maybe they feel like he's the most mild manner interviewer here. I don't know. But shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Bernie Sanders on if Democrats found the right messaging on the economy before the midterms. You got to hear this. I wish I could make this up myself, but I did not make this up myself. They still don't get it. Well, actually, I would say they do get it, but they're still trying to play the American people. I think Bernie Sanders and this Jake dude, Jake Tapper, I really think that they both think that the American people are stupid. Listen to this.
In the closing days of the campaign, he plans to cross off a battleground checklist: Oregon, Nevada, Wisconsin, Florida, Pennsylvania, presenting his own views on exactly how Democrats should be talking to voters about the economy. And joining me now is Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who, of course, caucuses with the Democrats in the Senate. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. So you've been calling on Democrats to focus on the economy, not only on other issues like abortion rights or attacking Republicans. It has been months since you've been repeating this message. The election is 16 days away. How's it going? Are you worried Democrats still have not found the right message on the economy?
He said, I'm sorry, but Jake said it's been months since you've been repeating the same strategy.
Well, look, what I think, Jake, is at a time when working families are struggling, having a hard time filling up their gas tanks, paying for food, paying for prescription drugs, we are living in a nation today where the richest people are doing phenomenally well. And one of the reasons for inflation is the incredible level of corporate greed. Check out the profits of the oil companies, the drug companies, the food companies. Their sky-high profits are ripping off the American people. And there are studies out there that estimate that 50% of inflation has to do with corporate greed.
But first of all, again, Bernie Sanders has been saying the same message for years about corporate greed. But you still caucus with a party that's corporate. You still caucus with Democrats who are still taking in corporate money. So this is the problem. Bernie Sanders as an independent, but still caucusing with the Democrats. I would say Bernie Sanders is a Democrat. I think the independent thing is just like, I don't know, for shits and giggles, because like, that's what he does. He always votes along with the Democrats. If you're independent, what are you independently standing alone on? Because every legislation for the Democratic Party, even that Inflation Reduction Act, even though he disagreed with the climate portion of the bill and delivered a speech about it, he still ended up voting for it in the end. So what are you really independent about? You don't stand alone when it comes to voting. You don't use that type of position that you have for any type of leverage for these bills. So just go on and say that you're a Democrat. Period. But he's been saying the same thing. Corporate greed, corporations, corporate money. But the party that you caucus with is corporate. They take those corporate donations. They're the reason why we can't have universal health care for everyone in this country, because they're bought and paid for by Big Pharma. I wish I would have seen this. Like, I wish I would have caught on to this back in 2016.
I think what the Democrats have got to say is we are going to stand with working people. We're prepared to take on the drug companies. We're prepared to take on the insurance companies. and create an economy that works for all of us.
We're prepared to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and create an economy that works for all of us. No, they're not prepared to do that. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party, neither one of them are prepared to do that. None of them. None. That's why we don't have Medicare for all. The only one there that wants to do that, that's actually speaking about it, because the squad, they stopped speaking about Medicare for all, is you, Bernie Sanders. You. Who's the we? Because this is the thing. This is how he got us before. Remember? We have to lead this movement. We have to revolutionize this country. He was talking about us, the voters. But Bernie Sanders is not running a campaign this time. And he's still saying we. So I take it he should be talking about the people in Congress and in the Senate. That's who he should be talking about, the people in the House and the Senate. But who's the we? Because if you think I'm going to go back out and I'm going to try to mobilize people, if you think that I'm going to get people to try to donate their money again, based on these false hopes and promises that you deliver to people, you're wrong. There is no we. It's just you. That's the problem. So when he comes onto these shows, he says we, and he's speaking for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not want to fight back against Big Pharma. And Bernie Sanders knows that. That's why Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill is still sitting there and hasn't been brought to the floor for a vote.
The abortion issue important? Yes. But we have also got to focus on the struggles of working people to put food on their table.
Early voting has started in key states such as Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada. What are you seeing and hearing about energy among Democratic voters right now out there?
Well, I am worried about the level of voter turnout among young people and working people who will be voting Democratic.
When have young people overwhelmingly showed up to vote in the midterms? None that I can think of. Young people usually show up to vote for the presidential election. And even then, come on, because young people, this second time around, 2020, young people did not show up in mass for Bernie Sanders the way that we could have during that Democratic primary. The numbers don't lie, guys. So but Bernie Sanders knows that's not going to happen.
And I think, again, what Democrats have got to do is contrast their economic plan with the Republicans. What are the Republicans talking about? They want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid at a time when millions of seniors are struggling to pay their bills. Do you think that's what we should be doing? Democrats should take that to them. Democrats want to have Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices. We pay 10 times more for the same drugs that are sold in Canada. Republicans refuse to do that.
Democrats refuse to do it too.
So I think what we have got to do is contrast what a strong pro-worker Democratic position is with the corporate agenda of the Republicans.
But
a strong pro-worker Democratic agenda. These terms don't go together because the Democratic Party is corporate. But you say we're supposed to fight against the corporations, right? So we're supposed to fight against big money interests. We're supposed to fight against big pharma and all of that. But the Democratic Party is corporate. But at the same time, Bernie Sanders is telling you we need to have a Democratic pro-worker coalition here. Those two things don't go together. Democratic and pro-worker, the Democratic Party and pro-worker, how can that go together when the Democratic Party is corporate? This is a big problem. Do you understand? We just talked to Socialist Alternative last night on RBN. And they explain how Socialist Alternative works. And one of the things I will tell you I like about them is that they focus on the worker fight, the worker efforts, and they don't tie it or connect it to the Democratic Party. That's the problem. This is the whole problem that happened with Bernie Sanders movement, progressive movement, whatever we want to call it. This is what happened. That movement was a campaign. So when Bernie Sanders lost twice in a row, there was nothing for us to fall back on. There was nothing for us to go back to. There was no worker movement. You see the problem? There was no let's fall back on these unionizing movement. Let's fall back on worker co-ops. Let's fall back on our mutual aid. Let's fall back on direct. There was nothing else to fall back on. So when he lost and he left his people, that was it. That was it. Why do you think part of the reason, aside from the squad being horrible with legislation, why do you think the progressive candidates that ran this year, why do you think so many of them failed? Nothing to fall back on.
To play devil's advocate here, if I'm a swing voter out there, a young voter, a working class voter, I hear your message, I think, but you guys control everything. Democrats control the House and the Senate and the White House, and inflation is really high, and I'm having a tough time making ends meet. Why should I vote for you again?
That's right. Working class people are asking this question. You guys control everything now. See, before it was easy. You could just blame Trump when he was in office. Then Trump leaves, Democrats take control. We still have the same problem. Why should they? Exactly. Working class people, if you donated your money to Bernie Sanders, don't give him no more money. Don't give them any more money. They sold you out. So the thing is this. Why should they? Listen to what Bernie Sanders says.
Well, we have half the votes, exactly half the votes in the Senate and a tiny majority in the House. And I think it's important that when we talk about inflation, Republicans will say, well, this is Joe Biden's fault. Really? Our inflation rate is much too high. It is 8%. It is 10% in the UK, 10% throughout Europe, 7% in Canada. Inflation is a global problem caused, by the breaking of supply chains because of the pandemic, by the war in Ukraine, and as I said, significant part of inflation has to do with corporate greed. What are the Republicans' response to inflation? What do they want to do? Well, maybe they want to cut wages for workers. Do they want to raise the minimum wage? No, they don't. So I think it's important to take the attack to the Republicans. What do they want to do other than complain? But bottom
didn't answer the question.
line is you cannot cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which is what they want to do. We have got to lower prescription drug costs, which is not what they want to do.
Why should working class people come out and vote for you again? Why should working class people come out and support the Democratic Party right now? Why should they do that? He went on this big old rant about what the Republicans might do, about inflation. When somebody asks you why they should do something, you're supposed to give them a convincing response. You're supposed to convince them, persuade. He doesn't persuade you. Other than, well, the Republicans are going to do this, this, and this. That's what they've wanted to do all along. That's not new. That's not new. What is the Democratic Party going to do that is going to make working class people come out and support them again? Bernie Sanders couldn't give you an answer to that question, which means they're not going to do anything for you.
Fears out there that a recession is coming, and President Biden even told me at the White House last week that he thinks a slight recession is possible. Take a listen.
Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No, I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly.
Do you think the U.S. is headed for a recession, and is there anything that can be done to stop it?
Well, I think what we certainly don't want to see is a Fed raising interest rates right now, which will result in more unemployment and lower wages. Here is the reality. You know, you ask, Jake, why people are upset, why young people are upset, working class people are upset, and the answer is pretty simple. For the last 50 years in this country, real wages have not gone up. That's a reason to be upset. Meanwhile, you got 3 people on top who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. So what working people all over this country are saying, you know what? We are sick and tired of seeing all of the wealth, all of the income going to the people on top. Help us out. Why are we the only country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? Why do we pay the highest prices for prescription drugs? Why do we have a minimum wage today? Republicans don't want to raise it. $7.25 an hour.
And 8 Democrats didn't want to raise it either, Bernie Sanders. Let's make sure you mention those. I'm going to look that up while I'm here. Those 8 Democrats also voted against $15 minimum wage. See, this is Bernie Sanders. This is what I said before. He's gaslighting the American people because he's purposely leaving that out because he still has to run cover for the Democratic Party. So he's only going to tell you that the Republicans didn't want it. He's not going to mention to you about the Democrats in the Senate that voted against it. And if I was Jake Tapper, I would push back on that. I would ask him, well, what about the 8 senators that didn't? But see, I wouldn't get that interview. You see how this works? I would ask him, what about those 8 Democrats that voted against the $15 minimum wage, Bernie Sanders? Isn't this just an example to show that both parties are corrupt? Bernie would never come back.
That is a starvation wage. Why do kids leave school deeply in debt?
Right.
So we need an aggressive government that says we're on your side, not on the side of the billionaires.
But do you think a recession is coming?
Hard to say. I think if we do the right things, we can protect the working class of this country.
Some Democrats are calling to abolish the debt ceiling.
You notice he didn't answer the question. Did you guys see that? And he's asking him, do you think a recession is coming? He won't answer the question.
Altogether after House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, poised to become the next speaker, threatened to use it as leverage for further spending cuts if Republicans win back the House. Take a listen to President Biden and Treasury Secretary Yellen, who have different views on how to move forward on the debt ceiling.
I think it's become increasingly damaging to America to have a debt ceiling.
Do you support the permanent repeal of the debt ceiling, sir?
You mean just say we don't have a debt limit?
No.
No. That'd be irresponsible.
See, that's interesting because if you learn modern monetary theory, that actually teaches you that the debt ceiling is a myth. So we've had several MMT people come on throughout the year. God, I can't believe it's almost 2 years throughout the year and a half-ish. Come on and talk about how MMT works. And one of the things that we've discussed is the debt ceiling, how that is an absolute myth. And I also asked them, do members in Congress know that MMT exists? And I was told, oh, yes. And I was also told specifically, Ro Khanna specifically knows about it. And yet they continue to go on mainstream media and tell the American people this lie. Learn MMT. Learn it.
You are the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Do you side with President Biden or is Secretary Yellen right? It's time to get rid of the debt ceiling.
Look, what I side with, you're going to have to increase the debt ceiling. But what Republicans are basically doing, and I hope everybody understands this, they're saying, look, we are prepared to let the United States default on its debt, not raise the debt ceiling, unless, you talk about, making cuts. You know what they're talking about? Cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Is that irresponsible? It is absolutely irresponsible. You don't use the debt ceiling to do that.
So you side with President Biden on this. You raise the debt ceiling, but you keep it.
Yes.
Okay. President Biden.
He typically does side with Joe Biden. And this is what I was saying as well. What is the point of Bernie Sanders at this point? If you're just going to go along and side with the Democrat who's in the White House, what is the point of your position? What is the point of having you there in the Senate? Because I believe the purpose of Bernie Sanders at this moment is to capture the young vote, particularly also the working class vote, although I don't know if he's going to get that again, but capture the young vote and keep pushing them into the Democratic Party. So when Bernie Sanders loses every time, this is what he does. Hillary Clinton is beating Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders says, vote for Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden beating Bernie Sanders in the polls. Bernie Sanders says, vote for Joe Biden. You see how this works? And that's how you capture more the youth. That's how you capture them into the Democratic Party, because younger people we're more likely to abstain, right? We're more likely to not go out and vote. But that's how you get them. You get someone like a Bernie Sanders to run on this progressive message that with policies that will really speak to a lot of younger people to energize that base, going to the college campuses and getting those kids and recruiting them and sheep-herding them into the Democratic Party. And some people don't like it when I say that word, but I call it like I see it, because that is exactly what he has done.
Biden said on Friday he believes crime is a real issue in the 2022 campaign. Overall, violent crime is up in some major cities in 2022, such as New York, Seattle, Los Angeles. One recent poll puts higher crime rates second, only below inflation, on the list of top issues concerning voters. Are you worried that Democrats are missing a major undercurrent here? How should Democrats be talking about crime?
Crime is a real issue. Violence is a real issue. And I'll tell you something, I go all over the state of Vermont. This drug problem and the addiction to drugs and the violence that drug causes is a huge problem all over this country. So we have got to focus in a smart way, not in a way that foments fear. But how do you deal with the growing addiction? How do you deal with the opioid crisis? And that means making investment in our young people in good education, in good job training, and making sure that we have good law enforcement doing the right job all over this country.
And who's going to do this? Because you see, God, I wish I knew what I know now back then. Bernie Sanders talks a good game, but who is going to implement these issues, these ideas that he just mentioned? Who's going to implement that? The Democratic Party isn't going to do it. They don't even agree. The majority of them don't even agree with Bernie Sanders. But he'll still vote with them anyway on weak ass legislation. Let's call it what it is. Who's going to do it? Who's going to implement this? Why is he not making the connection between poverty and crime? Higher poverty, higher crime. This is why you don't have high crime rates in rich neighborhoods, because their needs are met. They're wealthy. They have the resources. They have what they need. They can afford it.
So a more holistic approach, but do you think that would be resonant with voters who, a lot of them are just scared about going into cities or anywhere? They're afraid to leave their homes in some cases.
Well, what we need to do is it's a problem, and we need to have a sensible problem that actually works. And that's what we've got to work on.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders, always good to hear you. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Again, with the we. Well, we've got to work. See, it just, again, like I said, his whole independent status doesn't mean anything. It doesn't hold any water. It doesn't hold any weight, because he's talking about the Democratic Party when he talks about we. Now, I want to show you who those senators were that voted against that $15 minimum wage, because like I said, he's right that the Republicans were against it, but he purposely leaves out the 8 Democrats that were also against it. Here we go. And I can't get this stupid thing to close. But anyway, here we go. Let's go to the top. Here were the 8 Democrats who voted against the $15 minimum wage. Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, Jeanne Shaheen. What a name. Why do your parents name you a name that rhymes? Or maybe the person you got married to made your name rhyme? Let's go on. Maggie Hassan. She's awful, by the way. John Tester. Tom Carper. Chris Coons. And I want to point out something about these two. Chris Coons, Delaware. Tom Carper, Delaware. That's important to know. That's Joe Biden's state. So the 2 Delaware senators voted against it. Why is that not surprising to me? Going on. Angus King, who's an independent in Maine, but again, he's another one that caucuses with the Democrats. There you go. These are the ones that voted against it. Don't forget the Delaware piece here. That's important. These are the two senators from Delaware, Joe Biden's state, and they voted against the $15 minimum wage. Bad cookies. Keep those names in mind. They are the future rotating villains. Yes. So when something else in reference to pay or living wage doesn't pass, and it's those people, pay very close attention to those names. And I think it's no surprise that two senators from Joe Biden's state were the ones that voted against it. So you hear Bernie Sanders and other people calling out Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Why aren't they calling out Chris Coons? Greg Bruce says Janine Shaheen still uses the gateway drug argument against weed. What? They're Democrats. They're Democrats. JB says Bernie is a broken record without actually fighting the machine. The Dems give people nothing to vote for and no record of actually getting what people need done. Exactly. Luis, Sabby, didn't the question about Sanders' presidential campaigns raise that question for you? It did for me. Yeah, after 2020, man, I believed him after 2016. After 2020, I said, screw that. Lawrence, I was done with Bernie when he went on the campaign tour for Hillary in 2016. Stephen, why is Bernie not speaking truth? Because he is trying to support his party. He is on a team. Bingo. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Boo-da-boo-boo. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Bernie never used his leverage to force Joe when he first got into office in January 21st. When Joe asked Bernie to use his gravitas to rally his troops to push his agenda, he should have told Joe, Mr. President, I am not going to do a goddamn thing until you first sign an executive order to do for us what O did for Libby, cannabis, relieve all student loan debt, and then with Medicare for all, allow Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices. But you know, Roger, you're 100% correct. And that's what I'm saying. That's how you know Bernie is a fraud. He never uses his independent status to actually leverage anything for the American people, for the working class people. But he'll take your money, though. And he'll give his email list to Hillary Clinton's campaign and to Joe Biden's campaign. Face it, Bernie's purpose was to wake us up, not lead us. Sabrina, you said they sent him out there to get the young vote, but they sent him to media that the Mills don't watch. I have to say Mills, because majority of Z's were and still are not there yet. All of them won't be eligible to vote until 2030. He never went to social media. He was on social media. He used to live stream on his Facebook page, at least for 2020. He used to live stream to his Facebook page. He also has a YouTube channel. He still does shows on there every now and then. But yeah. But what do we need to do instead? This is what we need to be about. We need to be more about mutual aid. We need to focus more on that and direct action. Please check out the activist summit we did this weekend, because there were a lot of groups that came on and explained what they're doing and getting done for people in their communities. This is where we need to go. If you are going to vote, I think you need to vote third party or independent. I think you need to focus more on local politics where you can actually implement more change. And I think you need to do what this gentleman's doing here. Now, I want to give a shout out to Marlon Kamika, because he shouted us out and he said, at Unholy Rome, by the way, that's Rome from RBN. Hello, I've started my own mutual aid group in London, Empowering TP, and we have a mutual aid day next week, Saturday. Massive thanks to you and RBN for inspiring and educating me about mutual aid. So this guy, he decided to start his own mutual aid network in London. And he said he was inspired by us. So this was really warm to hear. Like, this made me feel really good. Guys, we love seeing stuff like this. because that means, and he put the event day here in London. So if you guys, any of you in the UK watching, September 29th, September 29th and October, 12 p.m., Saturday 29th. I'm reading this backwards. Oh, yeah, that's right, because UK. Saturday the 29th, October 2022, 12 p.m. The meeting place is Terminus Place, London. So I don't know where that is, but if you're in the UK, you may know where that is. But yeah, they're doing like mutual aid. And again, he said he was inspired by RBN. This is what we want to see people do. This is what we want people to get out there and do mutual aid and help your community. Because like, honestly, this is something that you have control over. We have no control over what politicians do after they get into DC. We can't control that. We don't have access to them once they get into DC. Most of us don't, right? But we do have access to people in our community. And this is what we could do. And this is really where we need to take things and what we do with RBN. And this is our driving focus. I do realize some people don't want to do this. They don't want to do mutual aid. They just want to vote. They just want to try to change things through the Democratic Party. Good luck with that. But one thing that has been proven to work is mutual aid. Mutual aid has been proven to help people in the community. And I've seen it help people. And it helps people immediately. And you don't have to donate your money to a candidate and have them run this long ass race throughout the year. And then if they win, hoping that they do what they said they were going to do for you. This is where we need to go. So shout out to Marlon, Kamika. Thanks so much for that. That's really warming to see. That is really warming. And Case Study QB, guys, let's give Case a shout out too, because Case actually did a segment on RBN's Activist Summit as well. Case Study QB. Case Study QB. Hey, we're making a song for you, Case. Listen, Case Study QB also did a segment for the Activist Summit for his mutual aid political party. Let me find it, because Case does a lot of stuff. When was this posted? Oh, he posted a lot of stuff already. Oh, there it is. See? Mutual aid political party. See you at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. It's the very first segment. So Case actually started that. I can't paste that in there for some reason. Eric, if you can paste that link in there, let me know. It wouldn't let me do it. I don't know what's happening. Anywho, mutual aid party. He talked about this on RBN. He went through it step by step. Check it out. Like I said, at least, people are coming up with other ideas. And I think we need to embrace other ideas at this point. Because it is what it is. That's right. So I am way past my time. I don't know, Eric, would it let you paste it in there too? Maybe it doesn't let you paste it either. I don't know what happened. Anywho, you can find it on RBN. It's the first. Let me see if it does it this way. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Second annual general strike activist edition. I just want to share it. Where's my share button? You know what's weird? Like on the computer, like on my phone, the share button's just like right there. It's all the way down here. Okay. There we go. So I'll put that there. Why does it say StreamYard? No, that's not the right link. Copy. Can I not put YouTube links in the chat? Is that what's happening here? Oh, you did it, Eric? Oh, okay. Oh, I see it now. Okay. Whoopsie. Let me get out of here. Anyway, check that out. Really good. Ignore this one that I put in. Just only focus on the one that Eric put in. That one. Yeah. Check out Case's plan for that, because I think that'll be really good for people's So other than that, guys, I'm out of here. Tomorrow night, Dr. Carl will be here. He has an interesting theory. Dr. Carl does not think that drugs are harmful. So he is coming on to talk about that tonight with scientific research and evidence. So Dr. Carl has a lot to say. So I'm excited to meet him. We do have more guests coming up. I'm not going to give names away just yet, but we do have some interesting guests that will be coming up. So definitely tune in. Tune in. All right, guys, I'm over time and I am a little bit beat. I had a long, like I said, we did the Active Summit all weekend. So I had a long weekend. So I am going to hit the hay. I'm checking out. Make sure I got everybody. Yep. All right. I am checking out, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.